Chapter 16 In Books and Crannies. Janner, Tink, and Poto walked to town after their lunch of apples and butterbread. Poto had insisted on accompanying them, which made Janner and Tink feel safer. The closer they got to Main Street, the more anxious they were about being seen by Slarb or Norm or any of the things they had been so unfortunate to have met the night before. Glipwood was eerily quiet now that the many visitors had packed up their belongings and left town for another long, sad year in fang-infested Scree. Jaybird's lanky form could be seen inside his barber shop, sweeping. Frenia's flower shop had a closed sign in the window. The only inn's windows indoors were wide open, and Poto waved at Mr. and Mrs. Schuster, the proprietors, busy changing the bedding and shaking out the rugs. Shaggy sat snoring on a bench outside his tavern. Without turning his head, Janner stole a glance at the jail. Commander Norm, to his relief, was dozing in the rocking chair on the jail stoop, his pudgy greenish hands folded across his chest. The rings on his fingers glimmered, even in the shade. Janner pulled his eyes away and moved a step closer to Poto. "You lads run along to Oscar's," said Poto. "I'll be watching over ye from the tavern. I feel the need to wake up old Shaggy and wet my whistle." Janner started to protest, but caught himself. While he didn't want to spend even a minute alone so close to the jail, he also wanted Poto to know that he could be brave and responsible. "Yes, sir," he said, straightening his back to his full height. "Come on, Tink." The brothers moved carefully past the jail to books and crannies, where Zuzab was perched like a vulture at the apex of the roof, his patchwork shirt waving like a flag in the breeze. Jenner waved to the Ridge Runner. "And hello to the Igby men," said Zuzab. His voice was soft and delicate. "I trust your time at the festival was pleasurable?" Jenner was surprised that Zuzab didn't seem to know about their near-death experience the night before. "Yes," he replied. "It was an eventful day." "Is Mr. Ratip inside?" Tink asked. "Inside, yes. Many are the boxes that arrived by wagon not an hour ago. Many new books for you to read, Janner Igby." Zuzab was courteous, but Janner always felt like there was far more going on behind his little eyes than his mouth ever spoke. Zuzab said no more and watched them enter the bookstore. Books and Crannies was a place of wonder. Rows upon rows of books, many of them tattered, charred, and ancient-looking, filled every shelf and corner nearly all the way to the high ceiling. Tall books, skinny books, books about daggerfish, books about the lineage of the kings of Scree, books about the rise and fall of the use of sugar berries in cake, books about the legend of Anira, books about other books, all organized according to subject in a maze of shelves. But it wasn't just books. Rolls of maps and odds and ends and surprising surprises were lying here and there among the many volumes, in plain sight but easy to miss in all the clutter. No matter how many times Janner had been inside Oscar's store, he still managed to get lost at least once before he made it to the office at the back of the building. When the door clicked shut behind them, Janner smiled and took in a deep breath. He loved the musty smell of the place. Tink had only visited a few brief times, so his eyes shot back and forth, trying to take in all there was to see. As they made their way toward the back of the store, they saw a wooden bowl full of dusty old spectacles. Beside the spectacles was a tiny, beaked skull with 3 eye sockets. "Look," Tink whispered. Janner smiled, enjoying Tink's excitement. On another shelf was a jar of dead, bright orange insects, and on yet another was a miniature wooden castle with a mouse watching them from the spire window. Janner came to a dead end and stopped in front of a shelf labeled "Books about Blacksmithing and/or Pie," and Tink, so focused on trying to read the spine of every book he passed, collided with him. Janner's feet got tangled in themselves and he pitched forward. He tumbled to the floor, knocking over a fat, round candle from the shelf. Glaring at Tink, Janner picked up the oily, greenish candle and set it back in place. A handwritten label on the candle said "Snot Wax." Janner retched, wiping his hands on the front of his tunic. "Eh? Who's there?" came a muffled voice from somewhere nearby. Suddenly, several books on the shelf to their right slid backward and vanished, replaced by Oscar's spectacled face peering at them from the other side. "Ah, Janner, Tink, I didn't hear you come in," he said with a smile. "There's a lot of work to be done, so no dilly-dallying. Time for browsing later. Follow me. The book slid back into place, and Oscar's footsteps thumped toward the back of the store. After three more dead ends, Janner and Tink found the owner of Books and Crannies pacing the floor of his storeroom with a pipe in his mouth. Now, lads, I'd have thought your Poto would have taught you better than to laze about while an old man like me needs your help. What in area have you two been doing out there? He said. There's the inside of Books and Crannies. We took a wrong turn at Screen history, Janner said, and then another at pointless poems, and no matter, he said with a wave of his hand. I believe it was the great Chorton who wrote, To worry over dallying brothers is not worth the trouble when a large shipment has just arrived, or something to that effect. Oscar's wide desk was cluttered with stacks of parchment, various kinds of pipes, feather quills, and bottles of ink. A nearly spent candle sputtered on a brass candlestick and lit up an ancient looking map that was unrolled on the center of the desk. Tink moved closer to examine it. Easy, young Igby, Oscar said, scooting behind the desk and turning over the map. Surely your big brothers told you that not everything here is permissible for young eyes. There are mysteries in the world that should remain mysteries for the young. Tink flushed, embarrassed that he was already in trouble. Janner caught his eye and gave him an encouraging wink. Where did all these books come from, sir? Tink asked. Oscar's eyes twinkled as they took in the shop with pride. It was easy to get Oscar to talk about his books. The real question, young Tink, is where didn't these books come from? I traveled all over Scree after the Great War, salvaging what could be salvaged. You wouldn't believe the rubble. Those rotten things burned our homes and cities to the ground. But as it always does, the dust settled. As the Screens began to unearth life again, they also unearthed these treasures. Books. Only they weren't treasures anymore. Not to everyone. I knew that I had to gather them up to preserve them. At the mention of the Great War, Jenner's thoughts once again returned to his father. He had never asked Oscar if he had known his father, or if he knew any details about his death. Until recently, the subject was studiously avoided in the Igby cottage. When he had found the picture in his mother's room, it was as if a crack formed in the dam that held back his father's memory. Esmond Igby was seeping into Janner's thoughts, and there was no way to seal the leak. Janner wanted to ask Oscar what he might know, but Oscar was busy dusting off piles of books and rambling. Most people work Most people were working so hard at rebuilding and adjusting to life with evil snake men breathing down their necks that they didn't have time for books, he muttered. They were given to me or sold for pennies. As the infamous Weasley the Leaf Thief said in his memoir, cheap is almost free. Look around you, lads. This is the best of the old Scree. Or, at least, it's what's left of it. Janner and Tink stood in the silence of the study. Suddenly, the piles of books and cluttered shelves were somehow more than that. What Oscar preserved was the memory of a world that had passed away, as surely as Esmond Igby had passed away. Oscar, too, seemed lost in thoughts about the past. He tenderly cradled a stack of books in his hands. On Dragon Day, he said, the people who visit me come to remember who they were. They always leave sad. Janner pictured in his mind the faces of the people in town with their weak smiles and hollow laughter. Now then, Oscar said, interrupting Janner's thoughts, here's what I need from you two. I'll sit here at the desk and keep record of the books and their categories. Very taxing on the mind, I assure you. And you two unload the crates and stack them where old Oscar Noss Reteep tells you. Just holler out the title and author. Can you handle that? Jenner's and Tink's nods halted as Oscar swung open the large double door to reveal a stack of 18 wooden crates of various sizes sitting on the lawn, piled precariously high. On top of the highest crate perched Zuzab, who smiled at the shock on the boys' faces. Well, we have much to do, I'd say. Oscar chuckled as he sat at his desk and lit his pipe. What was it the great poet Shank Poe wrote? Huh? Tink asked. Ah, yes, Oscar said with a puff of smoke. Get thee busy.